Welcome to Friday's Flavor, a podcast where we take the pulse on New York business from New York business. Subscribe to support the movers and shakers, making you love New York. Welcome to. Now you look what you did. You coughed when
I'm
I was
so,
saying hello.
I know. And you know what? I apologize for that.
I'm not even. Don't even apologize. I'm keeping it. It's staying. Watch, you'll be the only episode that starts with.
Let me cough one more time.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, that's over and done with.
This is the COVID era. You're not allowed to cough in front of people. Thank God I'm probably
Totally.
like 150 miles
Yeah,
away.
and I have to qualify it immediately. I'm not sick. Otherwise, you might feel like
Oh my
kill
gosh.
over on the spot.
Nowadays you feel like you have to be like,
I know. Yeah. Unless you're
nobody heard
angry at
that, right?
someone, then you go right up and you cough loud. I know.
I don't think I'm
So
ever angry. I very rarely get angry. Very rarely. And
I
when I
bet
do, I
when
don't think
you
I would cough.
are, I bet when you are, I bet you're not to be trifled with or provoked.
I don't remember most of the time. The only times I've ever gotten in fights when I was younger and like a teenager, when I would get in fight, I would black out. That's when I'm angry. I black out. I either like cry and turn into a hot mess, or I black out with anger and I'm just like, what did I do? And it turns out I beat up 3 girls and had a bad time.
There's a trail of blood 10 miles long.
I did not do that. I swear I did not do that. It was one of my other personalities that
Right,
I
right.
haven't even met yet. So give her a break. We're new friends. So welcome to Friday's Flavor, everybody. That was the pre-log. I'm with Scott Mason today. You got to check out his website, Scott Mason LLC. This man is ball of energy, so fun. And I'll tell you, he's committed to personal growth and transformation, resilience in himself, and creating that resilience in others and in their businesses. He's got a strong sense of adventure, I can tell. And he's overcome a lot of obstacles in his life and his career to make it to where he is right now. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is probably the most important episode of my program that you watch. If you watch another one, you probably won't. It's okay though. So he's faced a lot of just junk to get to where he is. And I always feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, people who go through hard stuff early on in life and early on in their career, I think they end up better off for it. I mean, in my personal experience, I kind of feel like I'm better off for it, and a lot of really successful people that I know are better off for it.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, look, as much as I don't like enduring bad stuff, and I certainly wasn't enjoying it while it was happening at the time. In fact, if anything, there were many days where I was like, why me? Why do I have to keep going through this?
Mm,
Looking back on it, I'm resilient because of it. I
yeah.
know how to handle difficulty. Real big challenges don't faze me in the least. It has to be something, the equivalent of a nuclear bomb blowing up in my face to knock me down. And that is the beauty of having had so many obstacles earlier. You do develop strength and inner fortitude. It's worth it.
Amen. Yes,
Uh,
sir. I'm going to agree with you 100% there. Yeah, I just feel like when you've been through it, you can also help lead others through it, which is why I think you're probably an extremely dynamic, business consultant and aid to anybody, even as just a friend. I think that you're probably one of those people that anybody knows that they could just say anything to, be anything with, and that you could just handle it. You'd help them. Yeah.
I pride myself on that. And it's funny, just last Friday, I went on a bike ride with someone who I'm just getting to know, although we've had a natural bond. And he began to talk to me about a series of real personal and professional challenges he was facing in a lot of detail. And it took our friendship to another level. One of the things I said to him was that I felt so honored that he felt he could trust me with that information and trust that I would be an ear for him and say something that was to try and be constructive. And I do find that by having gone through stuff and developing a heightened sense of empathy and understanding from it, people sense that they can trust you with
Yes.
that information. There's no currency that I feel between human beings outside of love that is more valuable, more meaningful, and that I hold more precious to my heart than trust.
Yeah. That's so great. And you can tell like that when you said the word,
Wow.
I called on you and I said this to somebody the other day. So I just met somebody who's like probably one of the most empathetic individuals I've had to the ability to interview so far, that I'm like super stoked to talk to. So I called it, Hannah.
You busted me out.
I called it, Hannah. If you're out there listening, she watches every program. She knows.
Hannah, I care about you too.
Oh my gosh. So tell everybody who's listening right now a little bit about yourself, however you feel fit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll talk about what I'm doing now. I'm the principal, as you said, of Scott Mason LLC. We provide business consulting services for small businesses who are looking to grow, scale, and sustain, particularly with regards to operations and infrastructure, revenue planning, general strategy and planning, as well as HR and other organizational building components of business growth. I also do a lot of mentoring with leaders of all stripes, including small businesses. You know, a lot of small businesses, their challenge is that the owners or the founders have tremendous subject matter expertise, but they don't necessarily have leadership or organizational expertise, which are two totally different things. You know, I worked in government for a long time, for instance, and one thing that would happen there is you would hear a lot of, oh, she's an excellent lawyer. Oh, he's an excellent architect. Put them over a unit of 100 people. The fact that you are a subject matter expertise in your area doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be a successful leader. And in small business, it's critical to have those leadership skills in order to build something that is growable and is sustainable. If you don't want to just be totally caught up working on the micro details of the business for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's true. And you go into business because you love what it is that you went into business for. Let's say you're a mechanic. You open a mechanic shop because you like cars and you like to get greasy and dirty, and you're the total opposite of your girl JoJo. That's how it is. You know, and so that's what you go into business to do. And then you start to get super busy and you don't even know how to handle the books anymore, and you don't know how to do any of the paperwork involved, and you don't know how to manage your taxes and things like that. So it's interesting. That's just like one example, but like you know, and in leadership I've seen that happen as well. Like, oh, this person is a very talented bartender. Let's put her in charge of all of the other bartenders.
Right.
I wouldn't be real with you. That was actually me. I was the bartender that they put in charge of the other bartenders. It was a disaster. It was a disaster because I was not at that point in my career, in my mentality, my maturity level was not there yet to deal with other people being different, right? So like I have a very adaptable personality, and I learn very quickly, and I expected the same things from other people. Yeah. Without having any sort of grace or mercy whatsoever. And I'd be like, why can't you just keep up? Like, I told you once, that should be the only time I have to tell you. And so it did not make me a good leader, the fact that I was a really good bartender. Did I learn later on? Absolutely. I learned that I realized, like, after I made a few girls cry, I was like, okay, I got to change my approach a little bit. I'm clearly doing something wrong. They want to quit their jobs, and that's not good. That's definitely, and that's on me because I was put in charge of them. So what am I doing wrong? And I remember literally having to go and apologize to like probably 4 or 5 girls that I worked with at the time and be like, listen, we started off wrong. My bad. I am not meant for this position, but help me get better. What do I need to do? It's hard to do that too. It's not a lot of people who are willing to go, I screwed up. I'm not doing good. I'm not doing this right. You know, what do I need to do to change? That takes a big heart. And I didn't want to really make girls cry every day. Yeah. I didn't.
I think though that goes as to a couple of huge things about leadership. That probably happened as a result of that. Number one, I bet those employees remember that and remember you, and as a consequence of the transition in the relationship, probably were loyal to you for life. Because you did something, you acknowledged that they were not necessarily feeling good about your leadership, which shows that empathy. It shows that you care about them and have their backs. And that is ultimately what's going to build that trust that we talked about earlier, build their loyalty to you and what you stood for as a leader. But number two, it also goes as to what I view as a very dangerous conflation that you see everywhere from politics to organization, and that is with intelligence, as opposed to necessarily subject matter expertise. Sometimes that can overlap, sometimes it doesn't quite overlap, but intelligence itself. Many bright people, and let's face it, you are, and myself included, reasonably bright,
I think
have the idea that because we're brighter than, or at least we think we're brighter than the people around us, we're going to be more adept at decision making.
Yeah.
And therefore we should lead because of that. Leadership is so much more than the ability to make decisions. Now, decision making is a quality of leadership, especially decisiveness, but how you convey it, the connections that you make between those that you lead and yourself, and a whole other range, confidence, a whole other range of packages go into what makes a leader actively effective. You know, leadership is, in my opinion, something that is very much an exchange. So many people view it dichotomously. I'm the leader, you're the follower. Really, there's a huge amount of interdependency. And in a way, when you think about it, it's obvious, because if no one will follow you, you ain't a leader.
Yeah.
So to some extent, a leader is dependent on the existence of followers. And so that is the root of the interdependency, not acknowledging it, which is implicitly what you did. You said, you have something to offer me. I am dependent on you. That vulnerability connects people. Powerful stuff.
You know what I learned from that? And this is probably the one thing that's really kept me in leadership roles and kept me in, mostly training positions throughout my career, is the fact that I kind of took from that leadership is really actually servitude. It's I want to use the word servitude, because I think when I realized that I have to give something to them, I have to do something for them. I'm not here to tell them to do stuff, because when I've done that, it really does not, they don't receive it well. People do not receive, and I'm like that. So it's funny. I hate being told what to do. As soon as you tell me what go left, I want to go right. I'm like, why? I question everything, and I immediately, and so I kind of understood that, wow, other people don't like to be told what to do either, but they do like to be led. And so if I serve and I do first, if what I'm asking them to do, then they will follow, and I won't even have to tell them. They'll just naturally do it.
I always,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I always tell folks, if you haven't said thank you today, then you're not a leader.
Yeah, it's so true. And being grateful, that's, just in life in general, this is business. Yeah, we're talking about business, but in life in general, if you are grateful to the people around you, grateful to your superiors, your inferiors, to yourself, if you're grateful for, waking up and having life today, and that, you're going to be good, and you're going to be kind to other people, and you're going to do more, then you're doing something right, and you will naturally rise. You won't even have to work for it. You will naturally rise.
Not only that, but when you have the vicissitudes that life invariably brings you, that fall is going to be a lot less hard.
Yeah.
You said earlier, we're talking about business as opposed to, humanity or life, or whatever the term you used. And what I think is interesting about that statement is the acknowledgement that it's in a continuum. Business is something of a theoretical thing, in that, like, legally, it's just an entity that's formed out of air and only exists on paper, but it is comprised of humans, and all organizations are comprised of humans. And so the humanity that we bring to the table ultimately is what is going to govern the interactions. And the same laws that govern social interface are ultimately going to govern business interface too, which is, by the way, sometimes why you have seen exactly some of these disruptions, particularly when you think about big companies. Utilities come to mind. They often, due to their size and the monopolistic or very narrow number of players in the market that exist, can easily forget that they're, especially if they're B2C, but even if they're B2B, they can forget that their customers are humans. Now, sometimes the customers have to endure the lack of appreciation or lack of gratitude that these large companies impose on them. But the minute an alternative comes, they flee. And there are certain large technological companies or some anachronistic utilities out there that I think may eventually have to face that one day. By the way, people, as you undoubtedly know, can sense real gratitude, real empathy, and real concern, as opposed to a robot voice on the other end of the phone saying,
Yeah.
thank you, we really care. It's not the same.
It's not at all. And that's coming from a person who builds those robots. I literally make those for a living. Oh my gosh. No, but we listen, it's for mostly government. And I love your perspective on this subject matter because you come from a government background.
Yeah.
And it's funny because government is meant to serve people. It's meant to be humanitarian. It is meant
Correct.
to put the lives and livelihoods of citizens above itself as an organization. And yet, the culture, which is something we're going to talk about today, organizational culture, the culture behind government in the background, it's not all it's cracked up to be. And I know a lot of people who, they've gotten the government job and they got the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, perfect hours, perfect benefits, best retirement plan. They can't wait to tear up and everything. And they turn into robots. I build robots less monotone than they are.
Yeah,
and
I believe it.
And it's sad because they think they're living their best life because of all of the cushiness and comfort that they think they get from that. But I mean, I hear a lot of negative things about working in government, and I know that you've had an interesting experience in it. So I love your perspective on this.
Yeah, thank you. I will say that my experience very much was in alignment with what you say. I think to some extent, the fact that it can be so difficult to get rid of people makes it one in which people are perversely incentivized to become robots because they know that nothing can happen to get rid of the bad apples in the bunch. And so there is a collective pull down in terms of work ethics, values, and commitment to the job. I think the other thing that we've also done as a culture, which I think is tragic, is diminish and ridicule government as a player of value in people's lives and as a function of a larger economic and social infrastructure. And so when that happens, when belief in the value of government erodes as a cultural matter, then the internal culture of government also reflects that. The final thing is that, and this would be a whole separate podcast or BS discussion over drinks that we could have as to what exactly drives this. But because government inherently by its very nature pulls the levers of power, at the top levels, you get people often, not always, but often, who are not necessarily driven by the values that you just mentioned a few minutes ago, but are more driven by the opportunity to have power itself.
Yeah.
And that then has a devastating impact on the larger organizational culture, especially if those who are being promoted at the executive level are primarily there due to their proximity and power outside of the government structure, their ability to successfully navigate up the government structure, or they do not have leadership skills themselves, so they surround themselves within the various agencies with individuals who may have technocratic skills, but again, don't have those fundamental leadership skills that you were talking about earlier, especially the humility to say, I don't know everything.
Yeah. And it's a tier thing. I mean, it's like, oh, let me move up the tiers. And it's the only way to do that is time. It's interesting. Like you're promoted for being there the longest versus being promoted because you do the right kind of job. And I can imagine that must bring down morale, for those who do start out like green and ready to go. I'm like, I really want to work hard. I want to show that I'm skilled in these areas, only to, see that doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
It's not worth putting the extra effort in.
Yeah, or alternatively, it leads to a culture of what I call Big Brotherism, named after that TV show,
Mm,
where people that have been there forever and know they're never going to go anywhere and know that no one can ever get rid of them become entrenched in these positions. And so those that are young and ambitious underneath them use illegitimate or devious, backstabby sort of tools to get ahead. They go out of their way to use the laziness or the lack of commitment to the organizational mission to make the other person that's been sitting there forever look bad so that they can look good, getting promotions that way, but again, undermining the overall system itself, because simply doing a great job, bringing outcomes that are favorable to what the government agency is meant to do aren't viable. So
right.
either you have this sort of entrenched, I'm just sitting here to marking off my days, or I'm going to stab you in the back so that I can look good. No positive incentivization that I was ever able to discern in my nearly 20 years across different agencies to move ahead.
Wow.
It's sad.
You think in 20 years you'd at least find one good spot. But
Yeah, I mean, look, I had bosses that were better or worse than others. And there were a couple of bosses I had, particularly early in my career, that were great. But the further up I got, and I got it pretty high, the worse it became. And
mm,
that's ultimately, mistreatment and abuse by bosses is what drove me out. That's not what should happen. You shouldn't have talent leaving an organization simply because the boss is mean.
right. That's the worst when
Yeah.
you know that you have really good people and management is the only reason you can't keep them.
Yeah.
That says something about the owners as well. And I've worked in organizations where the owner was fabulous. His management team, not so much. And you know, in one case, I it came to the point where I was like, I'm gonna leave. This is my 2 weeks notice. And he asked me
Wow.
why. When he asked me why, I was honest with him. I said, uh, you know, I'll change the name. We'll call her Sam. I was like, Sam, I can't work with an individual who's like that. I hate gossip. I hate it. I hate gossip. And the only thing she ever has to say is something about somebody else. And if you don't listen to her gossip, and I had literally at one point told her to her face, I didn't care if she was the manager. I said, all of the stuff that you tell me about all of these other women that I work with, because it was mostly a female crew, I'm going to turn around and let them all know that that's your opinion on them when I walk away right now, because I'm so disgusted from
Wow, that's
from
great.
listening to you all day long. And it was probably about a month after that that I was like getting prepped to leave, because she cut my hours. She made it very difficult to work there because I had been that honest with her. And then I refused to speak with her. I would say work wise, I would, discuss things that involve working, but I would not have personal discussions with her, and I would not interact with her. So she cut my hours, and I was a single mom at the time. So I was like, nope, I can't do this. I work hard. I show up. I'm reliable, and I'm worth it. So I have to go when somebody like Sam is here to cut hours and play games. And you know what ended up happening? He called her down to the office and let me confront her to her face, and she walked out.
Yeah.
She quit. And so I
Wow.
I ended up staying at that business for a lot longer, because of that, because she was no longer there. He replaced her with somebody who was actually far more qualified, much more, much easier to work with. And
Right, right, right.
I enjoyed staying there. But that doesn't happen often. You get a lot
Yeah.
of owners who they have the wrong people in, and they lose a lot of very good people before they realize, they had one person in there killing the whole thing.
And it's fascinating because in a business setting, toxicity and over politicization of the culture, which I consider gossip an extreme
Yeah.
symptom of, can be hidden by good financials for a while.
Mm,
Actually, the good financials can hide it almost indefinitely, although I don't believe forever. But what an owner can miss are the opportunity costs that the gossip and the politicization and the scandals and the mistreatment are bringing to the table. And opportunity costs are something that I urge every owner that I work with to consider when they think about their ongoing financial viability. And many times owners do know that there's someone in the mix that may be toxic and causing a lot of problems. Sometimes they have a culture where they believe in giving everyone every last chance before they do something. Sometimes they're afraid to terminate someone for legal reasons, and they don't have the legal background or the HR background to be able to tie a bow around the termination paper so that they can protect themselves, which is why a lot of times I'm initially brought to the table. And they may also simply feel guilty about firing people. But at the end of the day, I always tell owners, we're part of a larger macroeconomic picture. Our role is to, as entrepreneurs, purely from a macro perspective, is to ensure that the flow of capital throughout the system is churning, and to allocate the resources to maximize the efficiency of capital. So if we're not doing that, if we're doing anything other than maximizing those goals, which implicitly, means our sales are going up, our revenues are going up, our profits are going up, so that we can hire more people and bring more resources and have more cash flow throughout the economy, then actually we're not just failing our business, we're failing the larger set of responsibilities that we as entrepreneurs have due to our role within society. Absolutely. So the opportunity costs are actually a big deal. Every second. Look, I once had a boss, and this was in a government setting, but if this had been in the private sector, it would have been the same thing, who got mad because I put a paragraph that she didn't like in a memo. It was a paragraph that I had deliberately inserted there, not knowing if she would like it or not. So I had written it so I could simply cut it out if she didn't like it. But when she saw it, she became very angry, and I'll never forget it. She had on a black suit, and she stood up and she said, "This isn't what I wanted. I didn't ask for this. You didn't give me what I wanted." And there was a whiteboard in the room. In her black suit, she stood up and began to pound her fist against the whiteboard, screaming, "I didn't ask for this." And she was jumping up and down, going on and on. And finally she calmed down, and I consider that a pretty severe dressing down, a bit of an over punishment for the crime. And I went and cut and pasted the offending paragraph out within 2 seconds, and the rest of the memo she had no problem with whatsoever. But I spent the entire rest of the day sitting at home after I called my husband and told him I'm going to be fired, just sitting in my office waiting to be fired. I didn't dare do any work. I was very shaken, very upset, afraid of what was going to happen next. And I was at that point very high up in this city hierarchy. Imagine what the opportunity cost was in terms of taxpayer dollars that was spent by me sitting there terrified for 7 hours that I was going to be fired. The same sorts of opportunity costs for a paragraph. And the same opportunity costs can happen if that sort of thing happens in the private sector. It may not show up on that balance sheet if that's just a day, but that's a day if it's a salesperson that cold calls could have been made. It's a day that if it's a production person could have been spent on whatever the manufacturing equipment was. It's a day if it's food service or retail that inventory could have been tagged or put on, all sorts of things that could have even more affirmatively helped the bottom line. Devastating.
And and I'm sure if there were people around that saw that, it wasn't just you that was affected. It was probably everybody who was witness to that. If this occurred in any sort of setting, private sector, government sector, that the people surrounding you are also affected by your energy. They're affected by the for lack of a better word, the aura that you put off, in the day. If you're walking around miserable, feeling that kind of fear, that spreads. It spreads.
Well, and the other thing too is it's difficult not to internalize and model your own behavior after that. Yeah. And so I look back, one of the reasons I feel I'm able to empathize with leaders, and one thing I'm able to bring to the table, is that I modeled my early leadership traits on what I saw. Now, I attempted to make it better or be the best that I can, but I would be an utter and complete liar if I were to say that many, many times in my career as a leader, I have failed my staff. And that may have included situations in which I observed behaviors and saw that as a sign of strength or power or authority or whatever, and mimicked it without really thinking. or just had character flaws that I had not yet developed. I do feel like if you're really committed to leadership, it means committing to, and on the deepest level possible, making that commitment a lifetime one, to self-improving. There's always an area that you can do better. None of it, particularly with regards to our state management, our emotional maturity, none of us, unless you are a god, which none of us are,
Right.
our egos notwithstanding, none of us ever hit a level of perfection. None of us completely get rid of whatever traumas or triggers or issues that we might have had that cause our behaviors to be what they are. And sometimes these are dispositional or genetic traits that we can manage or blunt, but we can't necessarily eliminate. And so the struggle is ongoing. To me, the sign of a real leader, though, is a refusal, and it's a stereotype to say, but there's truth, a refusal to stay in the comfort zone, not just with regards to what you do, the externals, but what you're doing internally.
Right.
Am I feeling like I got my stuff together? Then you're not fit to be a leader anymore.
Right.
You're not acknowledging the truth. That's a dangerous place.
And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to level to, is the fact that, you know, I'm not maybe doing my best job, or I'm not,
Yeah.
maybe I could improve in this area. It's really hard to look inside yourself and go, here's X, Y, and Z that I need to work on. Like, a lot of the times we're big on patting ourselves on the back, and we let other people yes us to death and make us feel like we're doing a really great job, when in all reality we could be better in certain areas, and that can lead to a lot of personal issues as well, if you're not willing to look inside of yourself and go, you know what? And for me personally, I'll be honest with everybody, I don't care. I am a naturally selfish person. I am naturally self-centered. It is very easy for me to sit here and go, me, my, I, me. Or in Spanish, yo, me, yo. Okay? Whichever language I'm selfish in. I realized it probably, I'm serious, probably about maybe 8 years ago or so, 7 or 8 years ago, probably. And I didn't know it was selfishness at first. I just knew that I was not personally or career-wise exactly where I wanted to be. I was very unhappy with certain things, and I was not living my best life. And it took a lot of, we'll just say, balls to sit there and go, you know what? It's because you're sitting here talking about you're so you focused all day. I even went back and read a lot of some emails and text messages that I've written, and I must have said I, me, yo, my, I don't know how many times, much more than I was talking about the other person, though. And at that time, I started going to church. I'm Christian, and I started going to church, and I realized, the Bible be saying this, though. It's like, stop focusing so much on yourself and start focusing on what you can offer to other people, and start focusing on, how can I help others? What can I do? And I want to say that, and it wasn't immediate, because this change has been ongoing. It's an ongoing process to this day. But one of my big mottos now is give more than you get, give more than you take, give more, because you'll just always get more back naturally from in a leadership role. If you realize that you're not doing more for your team than they're doing for you, then you got an issue. You should be doing more for your team. You should be asking if they need help more than they're asking you for help. There should just be more give than get, and your life will change. Your life will change 100%. But it's hard. It's hard to say, because I almost got a little depressed. I was like, wow, I suck, dude. I'm like, I sat there and I thought about a lot of stuff that I had done or said, or opportunities with friends that I had missed because I was so me-centric that I almost got a little depressed. But over the years, I've gone, You can't go back and change it. The only thing I can do is change from here on out and focus on that, you know. And so that's what I've made a big thing is give more than you get, always,
I,
business
I,
or otherwise.
look, and I love it, and I love the fact that you may feel as though you were me-centric, but at the end of the day, you weren't so me-centric that you were not able to say, this is something that I want to change. I'm with you. There's, you know, I have a loud voice. I'm a tall man, a big personality. Other challenge that I have is that I do not hear my own voice accurately in my head. So I can say, if I can raise my voice a little bit and I hear later that people heard it clear down the hall, loud and clear. And for me, I'm just speaking slightly loud. Now,
Yeah.
heaven forbid I get angry and really start to yell, right? Like the earth shakes. There are times where the lack of self-awareness around my presentation and how that can come off to people, or how intimidating it can be, particularly if someone's small or they have a confidence issue, is something that I look back and I'm like, oh my God, imagine how I made someone feel. And like you said, you know, or if I was angry, you know, a lot of times I defaulted to anger because I didn't feel like as a male there was necessarily any other appropriate emotion that I could show. How
Wow.
many times could I look back, right? And you would think, weirdly enough, as a gay man that I would be somewhat freed from those strictures, but actually being gay played into it, because I was like, in my mind, I'm not going to be that stereotype either. And
Wow.
so, right, I look back and I thought, and I still think, how many regrets do I have because of that? You're absolutely right. We cannot live in our regrets, but we can embrace one quality that you and I both have, and that I explicitly heard with you, was the ability to acknowledge and engage with change and then commit to that and work, understanding we're not going to be perfect. There have been times in business where I have lost it and I've, you know, gotten upset and things like that. And the, you know, the main difference now is that I can call up the people who I've impacted immediately and say, look, I love you, I'm sorry. It's weird. By doing that too, if the person knows your flaws and you're vulnerable enough with them, they're sometimes like, oh yeah, I wasn't even bothered by it. It was you, and I know you, that's not who you are. Or
Yeah, I
it
know your
wasn't as
heart.
bad as, right, or it wasn't as bad as you thought it was. I mean, the other thing too is sometimes I feel like I might get a little overly sensitive to how I can come off, but I still rather be that than an unbridled, unrepentant, uncaring monster.
Yes.
You know, it's sort of funny that you mentioned your faith earlier. I saw a book of illustrations recently about that were all drawn and painted by a man that was envisioning hell. And one of the things that he showed was the moment after Lucifer's fall, where Lucifer landed on the grounds of hell. And the way it was portrayed, you could just see this angelic body shattered, wings twisted, smoke and steam coming up, you know, what appeared to be like blood coming everywhere. It sort of inverted the common stereotype of Lucifer or an angel as this ethereal, all-powerful being. It was almost as if by being, you know, thrown out from heaven, the throw was hard, and that landing was brutally painful, nothing anyone would envy or admire or think is fun or cool. And the real metaphor and the power of that photo, or that drawing, and I say photo because it was so realistic looking, was that it showed the risk of someone who's not able to put aside their pride and look at their flaws, check their ego, or whatever it might be. The fall that people face when that happens tends to be precipitous. And that picture showed what a precipitous, brutal fall can look and feel like, something we don't want.
Right. Wow. And you know, and it's funny when you say that, I almost think to what, you know, what I had said earlier with being regretful. You, I've heard descriptions of hell as being this place, you know, where you only have your regrets. You have you're not in the presence of God, because heaven is just being in the presence of God all the time. And hell is the opposite of that. It's being without the presence of God all of the time. And you only have your thoughts and your regrets. And And can you imagine? That's why I got depressed. I just
Yeah.
regretted so much. And so that can be your own personal hell that you create for yourself.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help you grow business wise. It doesn't help you grow personally. It serves you not even a little bit. Doesn't do anything for you. And so I love that, again, bringing back in what the Bible says. It says, don't live in condemnation. Have conviction. Be able to have conviction and go, I was wrong about something. I need to change this thing. But don't live in condemnation where you're like, well, I'm going to hell for this. I'm a terrible person. I wish I had done this different. That's condemnation.
Yeah.
And that is not of God. God doesn't want that for people. God literally says in the Bible, the only thing I want is for you to live your best life.
Yeah.
Go live you in your best life. And if it's aligned with my word, then I'm going to bless it 1,000% more. Like, I'm going to bless you. And I just want you to live your best.
Well, and the other thing too about that is living in a state of condemnation. And I never really thought about it that way. So thank you so much for bringing that into my day and into my sort of repertoire of thinking that I might be so, if you might be so open to just let me share with everyone who I talk to. But part of the danger about that is also that it deprives you of the opportunity to do what you're meant to do. I view myself as a mere vessel.
Yes.
Ideally on a stream that what I call providence is taking me to where it wants me to be, irrespective of where I might want to be. And if you simply dip into that stream, let that blue light that like I said, I call providence go through you and guide you, then your full life is going to happen. Again, it might not be what you expect. It might not be what you want, but it's going to happen. And if you live in regret, can't get out of it, you're actually committing an ethical crime because you are depriving the universe, providence, God, whatever you might call it, of the opportunity for you to change and therefore fully develop into your role in the universe. Now, it's not just about feeling great. I think that the deeper and deeper I've got into what I consider and feel to be a providential stream, the easier my life gets, the happier I am, and the more joyful I am. I think in the case of entrepreneurs, and small business owners generally, paying attention to that and thinking about what you just said about not living in your regrets is particularly important because our calling is, like I said, more meta than just running our individual business. So we're, again, failing in a larger social compact that we've entered into. And that's not only sad for us personally, but it's an abdication of our larger responsibility. And then we're talking about also larger providential issues when you're talking about fulfilling God's plan for you or whatever way you might be conceptualizing it. So what you're talking about, not living in regrets, committing to moving forward in life and changing so that you're constantly there, hits at least 3 levels of priority in terms of our roles in the world and our own drive to self-satisfaction and the best lives that we can live.
Amen to that. Listen, I could talk to you all day.
I know.
Talk to you all day long.
I feel the same way too.
Oh my gosh.
I feel like we're just warming up.
Yeah, for real. We're going to have another episode with you. This is my last question. What is your number one tip for a hopeful entrepreneur out there who is just getting started?
I would say, if you feel it in your gut, you got it. There are going to be days, and we all hear it, when it's rough and when it's slow. And there are going to be people who respect you, or who you respect, who may or may not respect you, who naysay you or ridicule you. When I left the last job I had before I owned business, my boss, who was the CEO of a large nonprofit, said, his first remark was, "That's taking a big risk, Scott." And I respect him and I'm friends with him to this day, but I don't think he fully appreciated the degree to which I felt called to do this. Wow. And I knew that in one way or another it would succeed. So part of my response to that inside was, yeah, it's a risk. I'm excited about that. That's going to be fun. Adventurousness is part of my personal ethos. But even if that's not how you view yourself, understanding that those troughs are going to be there, But those are character builders, going back to the very first things that we said. You have bad stuff happen to you, but then you end up strong.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, that I would just add purely as a practical matter, make an effort to learn your finances from day one. Like, if finance isn't your thing, buy books like Entrepreneurial Finance.
Or get somebody to help you.
Or get someone to help you, explain it to you like a baby. There's no shame in it, but that is the one preventable thing. People avoid learning finance because it scares them, or because they think that they're not competent. It's not as complicated as you think. You're not going to ever have to actually do the accounting. You're just going to need to be able to understand the paperwork that you got and interpret it.
And have that conversation.
Exactly. All of us have the ability to learn that. So that's just purely the practical thing.
Yeah.
God may want whatever fate he or she has for you, but it almost certainly involves you understanding your finances so you can make some money.
Right. Thank you so much, Scott. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to have you back on again.
I can't wait.
His information is right here below. It's not right now when you see it, Scott, but it's going to be right here below. You got to get in contact with him. He's going to bring your business to the next level. He's located in where in New York City?
Manhattan, Upper West Side, but I travel around the city. I've got clients everywhere, and I love them all.
Me too. God bless you. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. You are the disco diva of podcasts.
Boney M, folks. Look it up.